This is Essie Featured.
I'm just a fan. But I found it. I know the reason why Cleveland goes through so much heartache. It's the number 22.
Back in 2018, SportsCenter did a feature titled Cleveland 22, which connected the number 22 to all of the famous Cleveland sports heartbreak moments, such as the drive, the fumble, the shot, etc. For example, with the fumble, Browns running back Ernest Spiner fumbled on his 22nd carry of the game, and a win would have advanced the Browns to Super Bowl 22. With Red Right 88, Brian Sipe threw the interception from the 22-yard line, and that drive started with 2 minutes 22 seconds remaining in the game. Art Modell moved the Browns to Baltimore 22 years after taking over Municipal Stadium, and the list goes on and on. Now, whether or not there's any real significance to the number 22, who knows? That's for a statistician to decide. But it's intriguing to say the least. So when I saw this video for the first time, I decided to take things into my own hands and see if I could find other examples of the number 22 hidden throughout Cleveland sports heartbreak. And boy did I ever. So for this video, I'm going to be highlighting many examples I came across while researching for this video. So stay tuned, we have a lot to cover.
22 bones inside my skull are not enough to keep my brain from exploding.
Alright, so right off the bat, I have perhaps the craziest example. So, Browns-Jets 2022. Everybody remembers this game. The Browns infamously blew a 13-point lead with less than 2 minutes left, and the Jets had no timeouts. Well, first off, it happened in the year 2022, so that's worth noting. But after the Jets scored their first touchdown, when they line up for the onside kick, look at the clock, and the clock doesn't actually move. They end up recovering the onside kick, and the clock reads 1 minute 22 seconds. So there's that. And then taking it a step further, when the Jets finally score the go-ahead touchdown, look at the clock again. 22 seconds left in the game. That is spooky. That is spooky. And then take it a step further, when Joe Flacco's throwing that game-winning touchdown, it looks like his back foot is right on the 22-yard line there. So, I mean, 22s are just riddled all over this game. And again, it's easily perhaps one of the most baffling losses since 1999. Alright, our next example involves Joe Thomas, legendary left tackle for the Cleveland Browns, Pro Football Hall of Famer, famous for his consecutive snap streak, which was over 10,000 consecutive snaps. Well, we all remember it came to an end against Tennessee in 2017. Remember Joe Thomas had that bicep injury and then he was rolling all over on the ground. And that was kind of the last we saw of Joe Thomas. Well, guess what? That game occurred on October 22nd, 2017. Ooh-wee-oo. Coincidence? You be the judge, but that's interesting to say the least. Alright, our next example is Browns at Steelers 2002 playoffs. This is when Kelly Holcomb torched the Steelers for over 400 yards, and the Browns dominated the Steelers for 3.9 quarters. But Butch Davis kind of foolishly went into a prevent defense in the second half, and the Steelers kind of slowly came all the way back and ended up winning at the very end 36-33. One of the most heartbreaking defeats in Cleveland Browns history, honestly. Well, upon further investigating, this turned out to be the Pittsburgh Steelers' 22nd home playoff game all time. 22nd home playoff game all time. So there's your 22. Unbelievable. Alright, our next example, Browns-Chiefs Divisional Round 2020. This is regarded by a lot of Browns fans as the most heartbreaking defeat since 1999. I don't share that sentiment. I was just happy they won a playoff game, and everything else after that would have just been gravy from my point of view. But regardless, the Chiefs ended up winning by a final score of 22-17, so there's one of your 22s. But expanding on that, probably the most memorable play from this game is Rashard Higgins' dive for the end zone that should have been called targeting. Well, that was a yards after the catch play. Upon further research, Rashard Higgins finished this game with 22 yards after the catch. That one is crazy. Like, that one actually kind of freaked me out. I was like, when I was researching this, I was like, what is going on right now? Yeah, so on top of the Chiefs scoring 22 points, Rashard Higgins had 22 yards after the catch. All right, up next, Browns at Patriots 2013. So this is a game where the Browns went into Foxborough and were huge underdogs with Jason Campbell and, Rob Chudzinski was the head coach. So nobody gave the Browns any chance, but the Browns ended up balling out for 3.9 quarters. I feel like I've said that a million times so far in this video. But the Browns just played an unbelievable game this day in Foxborough, against all the odds. And they were up 26-14 with I think like a minute left, and then the Patriots just pull a rabbit out of the hat, score 2 touchdowns in the final minute, end up winning 27-26. Absolutely just heartbreaking, gut-wrenching defeat. There have been so many of these kind of crazy losses that this one kind of gets lost in the shuffle. Well, upon further research, I learned that this was the 22nd regular season meeting between the Browns and the Patriots all time. It was the 23rd all-time meeting because there was one playoff game back in '94, but this was the 22nd regular season meeting between the Browns and the Patriots. Unbelievable. All right, our next example is Odell Beckham Jr., OBJ, tearing his ACL against the Bengals in 2020. So this is the game that, was famous for Baker connecting with Donovan Peoples-Jones on the game winner. But a lot of people forget OBJ went down with a torn ACL in the very beginning of this game and was out for the year. And it turned out this was OBJ's 22nd start for the Browns. 22nd start for the Browns. So there's your 22. It was actually his 23rd game, but for some reason he didn't start the 2019 finale down in Cincinnati, ironically. So 23rd game, but 22nd start, and he ends up suffering a torn ACL that I think you can argue changed the trajectory of his career. I mean, was he ever the same player after this? I know he kind of had a brief stint for like 15 minutes with the Rams where he was playing really good, but you can argue his career was never really the same. All right, up next we have Browns-Raiders 2021, the COVID Bowl. This is the game where like half the Browns team was out because so many of them tested positive for COVID, and the game kept getting like rescheduled. I think they ended up playing on like a Tuesday or a Wednesday night or something, but the Browns were missing several key players, including Baker Mayfield and Jarvis Landry, and they ended up losing a heartbreaker at the very end, and it was really disappointing because had the Browns won, they would have improved to 8-6, and they would have been in sole possession of first place in the AFC North. And I personally think the Browns would have made the playoffs this year, and who knows how that changes the whole Baker Mayfield saga. But when the story was first announced that the Browns had a bunch of players test positive, there were 22 Browns players who originally tested positive for COVID. 22. Stunning. Now, that number did get dwindled down by kickoff, but when the story first broke, it was 22 players that tested positive for COVID. Crazy. Up next, we have Browns at Chargers 2015. Now, most of you have probably forgot about this game, but in 2015, the Browns went out to San Diego. They were the San Diego Chargers at that point, and they played really good football, but lost a heartbreaker at the very end. It was 27-27 at the end. Chargers line up for the game-winning field goal, and they miss it wide right, but the Browns were offsides, and it was cornerback Tramon Williams who jumped off sides to give the Chargers another chance. Chargers end up kicking a field goal to win the game, and Tramon Williams wore number, you guessed it, 22. So there's your 22. Tramon Williams wore number 22. All right, our next example involves Tim Couch. So this is the first one that's just about a player in general. Tim Couch was the Cleveland Browns' first pick when they came back in 1999 as an expansion team. So he was the centerpiece of the franchise. He was what they invested the most in. And he was kind of given a raw deal in some sense. I think as time has gone on, people look back and cut Tim Couch slack because of the circumstances. But, raw deal or not, he still is on paper a notorious draft bust. In fact, NFL Network actually ranked him number 5 on their all-time draft bust list back in the day. But when it was all said and done, Tim Couch finished his NFL career with 22 career wins. 22 career wins, all with the Cleveland Browns. Next up, we have Browns at Steelers 2023. This was the infamous game where Nick Chubb suffered a career-altering injury at the hands of Minkah Fitzpatrick. Browns ended up losing by a final score of 26-22, so it's fitting that they put up 22 points the night that they lose Nick Chubb forever. But what was also interesting about this game is that the Steelers never crossed the Browns 30, but still found a way to win. And Kenny Pickett for the Steelers finished with 222 yards. So poetic in a bad way that the game that we lose Nick Chubb forever, we put up 22 on the scoreboard, and then the Steelers never cross our 30, but then Pickett somehow throws for 222 yards. Up next, we have Browns at Texans 2023 playoffs. So this was the wild card game where Joe Flacco was at the helm, and Browns get blown out of the water 45-14, unfortunately. But this was actually a pretty good game for the first half, and even going into the third quarter. In the third quarter, the Browns were driving, threatening to make it a one-score game, but as we remember, Flacco was victimized by the back-to-back pick sixes, and really you could say the game was probably over after the first pick six. But on that drive where Flacco threw the first pick six, that drive for the Browns lasted 5 minutes and 22 seconds. 5 minutes, 22 seconds. And what's interesting is because the way he fell. Like, you see Flacco when he threw that interception, had he just like kept the ball there, or maybe just fell a little differently, it wouldn't have been 22 seconds, which is really interesting. And the pick six doesn't happen, and who knows how the rest of the game unfolds. The Browns could have very easily either kicked a field goal to make it a one-score game, or even scored a touchdown on this drive. So that is rather significant in my opinion. All right, quickly, I just want to throw this next one in here. I know I've been talking about football for this entire video, but this actually isn't meant to be just a Browns video. It's supposed to be Cleveland sports in general. So I quickly want to point out that LeBron James was 22 years old when the Spurs swept the Cavs in the 2007 finals. So that's worth pointing out. And the last example I have, and this is just a personal example, nobody here will relate to it, but one of the first videos I made on YouTube was called The Day the Browns-Steelers Rivalry Died. And I made the case that the Browns-Steelers rivalry ceased being the best rivalry in the AFC North on October 18th, 2009. And on that day, it was kind of officially overshadowed by Ravens-Steelers, in my opinion. Because as we all know, the Ravens-Steelers is just a continuation of the old Browns-Steelers rivalry. Well, by sheer coincidence, it turned out that this game was the 22nd all-time meeting between the Browns and the Steelers since 1999. And right hand to God, I did not pick that game because it was the 22nd game. That was a total coincidence. When I saw that, when I learned that, I literally had like an anxiety attack, because all of a sudden I was like caught in the middle of this 22 thing. It's like, what in the hell is going on right now? Alright, and that does it for all of the examples that I was able to come up with myself. In the interest of full transparency, these next 3 examples I got from either YouTube comments or comments on Twitter. I know it's a crazy concept having integrity on the internet and citing sources, but I want to be clear, I did not come up with these. Anyway, first example is the Cavs blowing a 22-point lead to the Knicks in the Eastern Conference Finals this past year, which eventually led to them getting swept. I think they were psychologically just demoralized after that. Another example is the Cleveland Indians, that awesome winning streak they went on in 2017. Well, it ended at 22 games. They won 22 games in a row, but they could not get past the thorn in the Cleveland sports side, which is the number 22. And lastly, the Cleveland Browns going 0-16, going down in football infamy forever. That happened 22 years after they left town in 1995. So those are 3 examples right there that I thought were significant and worth pointing out. But again, I did not come up with these myself. Well, there you have it. That's a look at all of the examples that I could come across through my own research of the number 22 being connected to Cleveland sports heartbreak. This is a video that I've wanted to get out for a long time. I think that Browns-Jets example that I led the video with is probably the one I was the most eager to share with the world, because, it's one of the most infamous losses since '99. And that game was just riddled with 22s. And I was shocked that nobody else had pointed that out. Like, I didn't see anybody on Twitter talk about that, or anywhere else for that matter. So anyway, glad to finally get this video out. Anyway, that's going to do it for the video. If you haven't already, please hit subscribe. Please follow me on Twitter, follow me on Instagram, and consider supporting the channel through a donation link in the description. Undecided what the donation link is going to be. I'm not sure if I'm going the Venmo route or what, so I'm choosing to be vague in this video, but the link will be in the description. And yeah, until next time, I'm Ramen Robbie, and thanks for watching.